Now, it's AM 650's The Law Show, a comprehensive look at everything you need to know about the law. Now, here's Sterling Fox.
Good morning and welcome to The Law Show here on AM 650. We have a couple of guests in studio from Murphy Batista LLP, a personal injury law firm here in Vancouver that we are delighted to be associated with these many months. Scott Stanley and Diana Robertson are with us. Good morning, you two.
Morning, Sterling.
Good morning.
The subject of the program today, we're going to talk about personal injury, your specialty, of your firm's specialty, but specifically personal injury and rehabilitation. And Diana, it's particularly auspicious that you're with us because in addition to being a personal injury lawyer, now the newest member of Murphy Batista, you have an occupational therapy background for many, many years in which you've dealt with the rehabilitation of many people who have suffered personal injuries.
That's right.
So this is literally, we've got you right in your comfort zone here, haven't we?
Yes, it is certainly in my area.
So, Scott, in terms of personal injury, do most people who suffer personal injuries require rehabilitation? Is that axiomatic?
Well, I think they all require some degree of rehabilitation. The question for us is to what degree do they need an occupational therapist to supervise that? Okay. And that's sort of how we triage it.
So, as an occupational therapist, though, Diana, in your previous life, how does the assessment process work? How does a lawyer, how do the courts, how do the insurance companies find out how badly hurt someone is and how long and complicated their rehabilitation will be?
When I first started out, and I was working for many years in the Okanagan, I did a lot of ICBC rehabilitation work.
Okay, perfect.
So I was on a list. They have a service provider list. Different companies, different therapists apply, for example, to ICBC to be on their list. So an individual has sustained an injury, they're in hospital. Often then the therapist will get a call or a referral to come see the person at the hospital or coordinate with the hospital for their discharge.
Okay.
So let's say, for example, a person has had a spinal cord injury. Obviously, there's going to be some issues when they go home with their home and how it's set up and equipment and wheelchairs and catheters and a bunch of stuff.
A pretty dramatic life change, right?
But it can also be somebody who's, they're going to walk again, but maybe they've broken both their legs and they're immobilized for a short period of time.
Right, okay.
It can also be a person who's sustained a brain injury and they're going to be coming home, but they can't be left alone. What's the family going to do? They need supervision. There's safety issues,
now,
that kind
as
of
the
thing.
Occupational therapist, are you making the call on each of these conditions and what the needs associated would be, or who makes the final call?
The occupational therapist works as part of a team.
Okay.
So often there would be a discharge team, a meeting before the individual is released home.
Right, and this could be after any length of hospital stay involving
Absolutely.
multiple surgical procedures, or perhaps just a couple of days.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So usually there would be a team meeting. There'd be some discussion about what that transition home is going to look like. And the occupational therapist would typically take on kind of a case management role in coordinating what those services would be. So in my past life, I would do things like arrange for home care services, nursing services. So they're kind of the OT is the one who kind of puts all the pieces to the puzzle together.
So at this meeting, prior to the patient being discharged back to his or her home,
Yes.
it's a medical team essentially, right?
Yeah.
So are there any lawyers involved at all at this point at all?
It depends. If
Scott?
the person has already retained a lawyer. Yeah.
Well, we like to be at these team meetings.
Oh,
because,
okay.
we consider the quarterback of the OT to be the quarterback of the rehab program, if
All
you
right.
can think of it that way. We like to be at these team meetings so that we can firstly find out information. It's an incredible opportunity to learn about what's going on with our clients, but also just to make sure that if there is some gap in funding, ICBC doesn't pay for everything. That's just not their mandate. They're quite good about paying for what they should be paying for, but there's things they can't pay for. And so it's the lawyer's job, I believe, to attend these meetings, and if there is something that needs to be funded, ICBC is not going to fund it, to see if there's private insurance or some other type of funding that can be had to make up the gap there.
Let me back you up, though, because, you said if the client or if the individual that is the subject of this meeting prior to being discharged from hospital, if that person has retained a lawyer, then you, if you were the lawyer, you would like to be at that meeting. What happens, though, when a person sustains a personal injury, either a car accident or something on the job, and bang, they're in the hospital and they're pretty messed up and they're getting operated on and so on? When should a lawyer be brought into that picture? Again, considering how badly banged up the person, the subject of it all is.
Well, I think they should consult, the family should consult a lawyer right away, because depending upon the circumstances of how the person got injured, it may be necessary to go out and do an investigation as to how they got injured, preserve that evidence, because in our system, you're only able to receive compensation if you can prove the other person or company or whatever is at fault. And
Right.
so that information goes missing quite quickly. I mean, I've have lots of cases where within a week or two the evidence goes missing.
Sure.
Someone falls off a structure or something, the structure's gone.
Mm-hmm.
So you do want to get retained as soon as you can.
Right. Now, Diana, in those, back to the hospital, and you, the occupational therapist, and all the other medical people
Yes.
gathering around, does your experience teach you that lawyers are frequently or seldom at those meetings?
Well, in my experience, I dealt with a lot of what they would call catastrophic injuries. So I did a lot of work with the ICBC rehab department.
Okay.
And they only take on the more complex files. So in those circumstances, usually there was a lawyer involved, because it was really clear that this person has significant needs, and in most of those situations, by the time the person is ready to be discharged, it's some months later.
Oh, sure. Okay. Right.
So the person and their family have had an opportunity to seek and obtain a lawyer. So from my experience, often there are lawyers involved in those team meetings. And one of the things I've just really learned over the years is how valuable those lawyers are, because they can help to fill in the gaps. So as a clinician, it was a great opportunity for me to say, this individual needs all of these things.
Right.
And I know going into that meeting, or I knew back then,
The insurance
that
company isn't going to cover it all.
exactly.
Right.
And there's kind of different envelopes of money that are available for individuals. There's the Part 7 benefits, which are rehab benefits that anyone would be entitled to, whether they caused their own accident or whether someone else had caused the accident. And those rehab benefits are quite restrictive in terms of what's available.
Okay.
And then there's the other part where the lawyers get involved, the tort part of it. And so there's more flexibility there on that end of it. So as a therapist, I learned over the years kind of that there were these two pockets of money available. So when I'd go to a team meeting, I could say, this person needs all of these things, and I know only these certain items are going to be covered
Right.
through the Part 7 rehab benefits, but then turning to the adjuster or to the law firm to say, are you able to help cover or somehow get access to funds for these other things that are not covered?
Right. So in terms of advice to listeners here, Scott, and a good opportunity to dispense a little, when a personal injury, whether it's a catastrophic, as in super serious, as Diana was describing, or a significant personal injury through something on the job, maybe a sporting accident, maybe a car mishap, the family is struggling with all of the details and trying to get somebody well and all the rest of it, frequently isn't going to think of a lawyer right off the top, are they? And your advice is try as soon as you can to come to terms at least with approaching a lawyer. And you can call Murphy Battista, for example, and talk to a fellow like yourself. It's a free call, and at least you have a sense of where you stand.
Yeah, I think it should be your second or third thought
Okay.
to phone a lawyer, typically, if you've had a serious accident. And I mean, if our clients are in a hospital, we won't have them sign any agreements, because I never know what sort of medications they're on. I've been back to the hospital and I had a client with a brain injury that just couldn't remember me.
Sure.
And so you can't actually have them sign a legal binding agreement until you know that they're able to, or someone is able to sign it on their behalf.
Sure.
But they definitely need to consult a lawyer right away, because information does go missing. Black boxes on cars get stripped and things like that. It's very, very important. I mean, nowadays we've got video cameras all over the place. We've got an interesting case where we'd have no case but for this video camera that we were able to locate, and the only way we were able to do that is we were retained very, very quickly.
Right.
And a lot of these videos are kept on loops.
That's right, and they get erased after
Yeah.
20 days or 15 days or
You
whatever.
bet.
So you got to
You
get
bet.
the lawyers in there and secure that evidence.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I know even transit, the BC Transit, if an incident happens, the bus driver can push a button in the bus and preserve that video, but I believe it's only preserved for 30 days.
Okay. So again, and there's just when these incidents occur, they're so sudden and so unexpected. Everybody, not only the person who's the victim in the case, but that person's family and support group, everything just goes completely sideways. It's a traumatic event for all people. So it's understandable, Scott, that people would overlook a call to a lawyer because there's so many other details to take care of. But you're suggesting maybe you just shouldn't skip over the lawyer part as quickly as you might want to.
Second or third call.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Again, just to know where you stand.
Just to know where you stand, to make sure that you've got, if there is a case, the evidence going to be preserved. Yeah, it's something that should be done.
Okay. So back to the medical team and your experiences before you became a lawyer as an occupational therapist, Diana. Once the needs of an individual who suffered a traumatic injury and who will require rehabilitation, once some kind of roadmap is developed for getting that person, getting their life back, as Scott likes to say, where does the process go from there? The person obviously is discharged,
right,
and then off you go, right?
Yeah, and so then at that point they would start with whatever treatments they need, whether it's physiotherapy, occupational therapy. Sometimes we would put in a rehab assistant to work with them, particularly individuals with brain injuries and cognitive issues. And then it's really about giving them some time to recover with some supports and making sure they're safe when they're doing that. And then often, it's a period of years, where we're, adjusting and tapering services as they need them. Sometimes it's gonna mean long-term needs, and that's where my involvement kind of evolved as my experience as a therapist providing treatment evolved to where I was starting to do more medical legal assessments. And that's where a therapist would provide expert witness testimony in court,
right.
With respect to the care needs of this individual. So, this person is, 3 years, 2 years post-accident. They've plateaued. This is as good as it's going to get. So what does the long haul look like?
So you would go to court to testify on behalf of the injured person who's looking for more support from the insurance program that they're a part of, and the insurance company said, no, we've pretty much maxed out here. And then Scott gets contacted, or Murphy Battista, and no, wait a second, no, that you have more responsibilities to this injured person.
Yeah.
And so you would testify on behalf of the injured person?
Sometimes when you're an expert, our duty as an expert is to the court.
Okay.
So our duty is to be objective
Right.
and to provide an assessment of the person's abilities and their needs. And it shouldn't matter whether you've been retained by Scott's firm or whether you've been retained by ICBC Defense.
But you are cross-examined by the
Absolutely.
other party, and
Absolutely.
your motivations are questioned.
Absolutely. So in my practice, I did a mix. So sometimes I would be retained, brought in by ICBC, not ICBC directly, but a law firm that's doing the defense on behalf of ICBC.
Right, yeah.
And I would do the same assessment that I would have done had I been retained by a plaintiff lawyer.
Okay, so just drive it down the middle and just the facts, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, because you have to justify it when you get into court.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't always happen with experts, though. It's a big business. Yeah, it doesn't always happen. There's a lot of experts on both sides. There's some that sort of pander to the plaintiff's case.
Well, there are professional expert witnesses.
Yeah,
These people make a living going around from courtroom to courtroom testifying.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that, provided they're objective.
Right.
And there are some experts who are less than objective on both sides. There's some that typically only show up on plaintiff cases, and there's some that typically only show up on defense cases.
On this episode of The Law Show, friends, we're talking with Scott Stanley and Diana Robertson from Murphy Battista LLP, a Vancouver personal injury law firm. We're talking about personal injury and rehabilitation and what happens to people who are badly injured and how do they get their life back. What processes are involved, and how can you benefit from this, perhaps if this should ever happen to you down the road. God forbid it should, but perhaps we can offer a few tidbits on the program this morning that'll help you sort things out. We'll be back with lots more right after this quick timeout.
This is AM 650's The Law Show. There's more of the show still ahead.